I'd like to welcome you to what is called Affordable Housing Week. This is one event of many others, and given that this is Tuesday, right? Yeah. I can't remember. There are still plenty of other events that you can attend. You can go to SD at Home and look at their calendar and find some other events. There's all sorts of different things happening. Can everybody hear me? Yes. Yeah. Okay, this event is we're going to show you a short video on what HomeFirst is and supportive housing. And then we're going to have a blockbuster all-star panel, and we also will take your questions. So if you have any questions, we have index cards and pencils. We will walk around, and if you want to write out your question, we'll give you the index card, and then you can hold it up when it's done, and then we'll give it to our moderator for that. Anyway, our group is called San Jose Residents for Housing Solutions. We're a young group, and we are just a group of people who live in San Jose who would like to find solutions for affordable housing. We want to have conversations with everybody. No matter what you think or how you think about it, we want to talk. Because it's when we sit down and talk and listen to each other that we can find solutions. Because the whole point of doing anything is to try to solve the problem. Now, does that mean that everything that's done is going to work immediately? No. But if there's a problem, we learn to address the problem and fix it. Because that's how we're going to move forward, and that's how we're going to improve our community, and that is how we are going to get to where we want to be. So before I continue, I'd like the people who are involved with San Jose Residents for Housing Solutions, can you just come up here real quick so I can just show everybody we have a very dynamic, wonderful group of people. Robert, don't mind back there. Lonnie. This is our group of people here, and I'll let each person quickly introduce themselves. Of course, I didn't introduce myself. I am Jackie Hefner, and I am part of San Jose Residents for Housing Solutions.
Karen Latin.
Kristen Taylor. Santa Patel.
Robert Aguirre. Brian Gurney.
Amy Georgiadis.
Marie Arnold. Lonnie Bauer.
Each other 6 months ago. So I guess it's about 7-8 months ago. We did not know each other at all. I had never met, except I knew Marie Arnold, which is my aunt. So I love it. Anyway, Kara, do you want to start us off? So we're going to start you off with a short video. We have uploaded the video from YouTube. So if you like it, you can actually go to YouTube and find it and have other people.
Brian,
On any given night in the U.S., over 500,000 people sleep on the street. And there's no shortage of programs doing outreach to these folks with mental health services or addiction counseling or even job training. But there's one simple program that's revolutionizing homelessness by dealing with the problem head on. I'm Ryan Duffy, and this is Now What? In the middle of downtown Los Angeles, there's a 50-square block village made up of cardboard and tent houses. Most of us know it as Skid Row, and it's estimated that there are as many as 18,000 people who sleep there every night. One of those people is Tony Presley, a 69-year-old Vietnam vet who found himself homeless after returning from the war.
When I left, I was happy, normal, just a gentleman. When I come back, I was everything but that. I'm walking around sick and don't know a damn thing about it. I was isolating myself. I didn't want nobody around me and didn't want to be around nobody.
Tony was diagnosed with PTSD, and like many others with mental illness, he found it difficult to hold down a job. I recently sat down with him to discuss his journey.
When I first became homeless, it was like a kid who gets lost. You try to figure a way to get back to where you were, but there's nowhere to go. You don't have any resources. You have nothing that'll help you but yourself. You're lost. For a long time, you're lost.
What Tony's describing is what's now referred to as chronic homelessness, and it first became an epidemic in the early 80s, when cuts to housing and mental health services forced thousands of individuals onto the streets.
Reagan initiated the deinstitutionalization of the mentally ill. Large state-run psychiatric institutions were emptied out without appropriate housing and supports being put into place in the community.
Chronic homelessness has become a permanent condition, and many cities are finding their resources drained by an increasing number of homeless residents moving in and out of jails, emergency rooms, and detox facilities. A recent study found that 800 of the most frequently incarcerated people in New York City cost taxpayers $129 million. Over half of those people just so happen to be homeless.
Keeping people on the streets is expensive. Public spending on somebody who is homeless is upwards of $30,000 or $40,000 a year. It's huge money that could be put to much, much better use.
It does get hard to get off the streets. Have you been in it for a long time? But still, you got this thing in the back of your head, I want out.
In cities across the U.S., it's becoming effectively illegal to be homeless. There's been a 60% increase in bans on camping in public, and even more laws against sleeping in your car. For the over 500,000 people who sleep on the street any given night in the U.S., they're on the wrong side of a whole lot of new legislation, and the pathway out of chronic homelessness is becoming increasingly difficult to see.
In observing the repeated failures of the existing system, it was clear we needed to do something different.
Sam Semberis first became interested in the problem of homelessness during the early 80s, when he worked as a staff psychologist at Bellevue Hospital in New York, where he first encountered the Housing Ready model. Housing Ready was the accepted approach to housing the homeless at the time, and required candidates to comply with a strict set of rules before they were rewarded with a place to live.
Can you demand treatment and sobriety from every person who is applying for your apartments? Of course you can't. You'd be sued.
And this is what led Sam to a simple, revolutionary new model: Housing First. Sam believed that what the homeless needed first, before substance treatment or mental health counseling or any other service, was simply a place to call home.
We can actually put them in housing and get them into treatment much more effectively if we give them housing first and then wraparound services. That is the cure for this group of people.
And it seems so simple, right?
Yeah.
And on a base level, to go, people are homeless and what they need is homes, seems almost so obvious that you don't want to say it out loud.
I know.
Housing First is a social services program implemented at the city level. Sam and his organization work through the mayor's office, the municipality, and local advocacy groups to reallocate existing funds being used on homeless management into more permanent housing options.
The results of doing Housing First were surprising to us. We had no idea when we would put people into an apartment whether they would succeed or fail. I mean, if we could do as well as the existing systems of care, which was hovering somewhere around 40 or 50%, we would have been pleased. But the thing is, it worked terrifically well. In the first year, we had an 84% success rate. So we knew we were onto something.
And this is where Housing First really surprises people. Not only does it empower people to take charge of their own lives, but it makes financial sense as well.
People who are homeless are going in and out of hospital or in and out of detox or in and out of jail, which are very expensive social programs. Putting someone into an apartment is actually much, much cheaper than keeping them homeless.
One of the early adopters of the Housing First program was Lloyd Pendleton, the director of Utah's Homeless Task Force.
We did a study here and came out about $20,000 a year per person, and we could house them for about $12,000. So we used that as the basis to say economically it's much more feasible and much more effective. So I said, if we're going to do this, we're going to find the most challenging, difficult, chronically homeless people we can find. 22 months later, all 17 were still housed. So we knew that we could house anybody, and so we became believers.
One of the success stories of Utah's program is Susan Barrett, a formerly homeless woman who, along with her husband, spent 3 years living on the streets.
We have lived in this apartment for 1 year, and it's been the most amazing year of my life. My mental health has gotten better. We dropped the dosages of my meds drastically. It's to the point where I think I'm ready to have a job again.
Now, Sam is bringing the Housing First model to Los Angeles. Thanks to Housing First, Tony has been paired with a case manager, Jillian, and given a voucher for over half of his rent. Now he's on the hunt for his first home in over 15 years.
Hello, I'm trying to inquire about the apartments you have for rent.
We joined Tony in North Hollywood, where Jillian had found an apartment she thought would be a good fit.
So a typical 2-bedroom layout.
I like it.
You like it?
Yeah.
It's a great place, man.
Yeah, I like it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Seeing Tony apartment hunting for the first time was honestly kind of amazing. Like almost to the degree where I felt embarrassed to be here because it's such a big moment for him. He hasn't had a home in over 15 years. So to walk into one that could be his was kind of an unbelievably intimate moment.
Well, now that there's a real prospect on the horizon, how you feeling this morning? You feeling excited?
More than that, actually. Not excited, ecstatic.
We're in North Hollywood. Tony has moved in. It's been about 5-6 weeks since we last saw him, and we're gonna go see how he's doing.
Yeah. Hey,
Hey.
Ryan. How you doing, baby?
What's up, man?
I'm all right.
Dude, it's good to see you.
Oh, it's good to be home.
What's the best part of it?
I don't have to worry
Right.
like I had to worry out there in those streets.
Just a little peace of mind.
A lot of peace of mind.
Right.
It's a whole lot different being secure.
Sure.
It feels like I came home to Mama and she gave me a hug. That's how I feel. I'm all right now. I'm a happy man now.
What Housing First has really shown is that given the opportunity, the vast majority of folks retain housing. They stay housed.
Homelessness is a very human problem that we've historically dealt with in a pretty inhumane way. Housing First is a program that rethinks that approach from the ground up. And for all the stats and savings that illustrate its success, maybe the real metric we should be focused on is the life-changing impact it's had on folks like Tony.
Homelessness, I think, is a condition that can easily change. That same caring, thoughtful person is the same person who's homeless or housed. We're just giving them an opportunity to express more of themselves when we house them.
It's hugely empowering for people to have choices and to feel a sense of pride and ownership. Nothing builds self-esteem like having a home.
Gives you a reason to succeed, a reason to step forward. I got something else I can do besides roll up in a blanket and freeze all night.
Because this ultimately is what the solution to homelessness is in this country. It's going to be a matter of political will. We're going to have to up the ante and really invest in ending homelessness because we know we can do it.
So this was just a very short introduction. There are many other videos on YouTube if you look up Housing First that you could learn even more information. So we have a change to our panel this evening. One of our members, Phil Mastrocola, has some heart problems and couldn't be with us. But luckily we have an amazing team. So this is going to work fine. So this evening, our moderator is going to be Robert Stromberg. Hold on. And Robert is with Destination Home. He supports the work, Bob supports the work of Destination Home as project manager for housing-ready communities, focusing on public policy, community engagement, and advocacy. He sits on the board of trustees of the San Jose chapter of the Awesome Foundation.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. It's always exciting to me when we're having a conversation about ending homelessness. If I could see a show of hands, who would like to end homelessness in Santa Clara County? I suspected as much, but it's good to let yourself be known and be seen. We're missing one of our panelists. Did he disappear? On the way. I don't want to get too far along the road without him. So I'll understand if my next request doesn't work. I grew up in a Southern Baptist church and it never worked there. But we have some empty seats toward the front. And if people could come a little bit closer, we might have a more intimate conversation. So please be brave. Be the one in the back who comes to the front row and joins us. Excellent. We have one volunteer. Fantastic. Love to see it. I did not expect that to work. Thank you so much. So we'll kind of get rolling a little bit here as we wait for Mr. Aguirre to join us, and I'll go through a little bit of the introductions of our panelists. I'm very proud to be on stage with these fine individuals today to help us learn a little bit more about Housing First. The documentary video is fantastic and really answered some of the questions that we're probably going to get into. And some of you may have been paying close attention to this and already know a lot about Housing First. And so hopefully you'll be resources for your neighbors and for your community. So I'll introduce first Mr. Sandy Perry. He is president of the Affordable Housing Network in Santa Clara County, a Christian minister and volunteer advocate and organizer with tenants, homeless people, and others. There you go. We can applaud. That's fine. And others struggling with housing, like Robert, others struggling with housing and related issues. Sandy was lead manager of the H.O.M.E.L.E.S delivery ministry and First Christian Church Family Shelter for most of the time it was open, from 1997 to 2009. Thank you for being with us, Sandy. I'll next introduce who just joined us, Robert Aguirre, who is co-founder of a grassroots organization called H.O.M.E.L.E.S, all capitalization, homeless. He's also an organizer and advocate for the people experiencing homelessness in Silicon Valley. Thank you for being with us, Robert. We're also joined by Andrea Urton on the far end, who is the CEO at HomeFirst. Joined HomeFirst in March 2015 after serving as the agency's interim CEO. She has an MS in clinical counseling psychology and is licensed as a marriage family therapist. Andrea spent her career working on mental health, striving to provide high-quality, culturally competent service to youth and families in high-risk communities. Thank you so much for being with us. And our last-minute addition happens to be a co-worker of mine at Destination Home. Ray Bramsom recently joined us at Destination Home as Chief Impact Officer, where he's working on targeted investment and engagement strategies toward ending homelessness. He formerly was head of the Homelessness Interventions and Solutions Division at the City of San Jose and previously also worked with HomeFirst. Thanks for being with us, Ray. So I understand we're going to have audience questions, and I think there are cards that you may have or can have to fill out, so please take advantage of that. I'd love to hear what you would like to know about so we can guide the conversation in that direction. But while we're getting there, I'll kick us off with some initial conversations, and maybe we could hear from everybody, starting from Robert going down. And I'd like to ask, what was your first experience with Housing First? When did you learn about it? When did you see it in action? How did you get to know the Housing First model? Well, 1 second, let's get a microphone so I'm not the only one. Oh. Check, check.
Okay. All right, so I was homeless living in the jungle. I don't know if everybody knows what the jungle is or where it was. But I was living there, and I heard about the Housing First program when they were coming around and interviewing people and trying to find out who was interested in getting housed. And at that time, I was very interested in getting houses, as was everyone else. There were over 300 people living in there. And so we were all trying to get housing. The problem was there weren't enough vouchers to go around, and there weren't enough houses to go around. So at the time of closing of the jungle, they had 200 vouchers for over 300 people, and they were only able to house 144 because there was no housing available. So Housing First is a great concept as long as there's housing. So that was my first introduction to it.
Thank you, Robert. Sandy, when did you first encounter Housing First?
I first encountered Housing First the first time I met some homeless people, and this was back in the 1980s in San Francisco. There was a group that formed called the National Union of the Homeless, and there was a chapter that was formed in San Francisco. And actually, virtually all the homeless people that I have ever met said what we need is housing first. And about 20 years later, I think the psychologists discovered it, and then the shelter providers discovered it, and then the housing bureaucrats discovered it, and everybody's been talking about it. But what they don't mention, it's a complete failure. And the reason it's a failure is just because of what Robert said. They talk about Housing First, but they refuse to provide the housing, and that's why housing is still going up in Santa Clara County. It's going up faster and faster in Santa Clara County because our government officials, our tech companies, the powers that be are refusing to address it. They have no use for people anymore. So San Jose's housing policy was summed up for me by one homeless individual who told our group, they heard from one of the park rangers, our policy is to make you leave this city and never come back. That's where we're at today.
Thank you, Sandy. Ray?
Thanks, Robert. So, I guess I first ran across Housing First in 2004. The H.O.M.E.L.E.S S Foundation had funded an early Housing First pilot in Santa Clara County for families. Fantastic results from the program. After 2 years of being housed, 97% of the clients who had received the subsidy remained in their housing. Awesome. And you know what the other panelists have said, Housing First really requires housing to be functional. But we are seeing that when we can get people into homes and we get all those barriers out of the way like we did in that early pilot, people are really successful. 94% in the last 3 years of individuals housed through the Housing First model have remained in their homes. So I think as a model, it's terribly successful. Great. You just have to have the supply to get there. Thank you, Rick. Andrew?
Thank you, Rick. I heard about Housing First when I got the job at HomeFirst. And that was in January 2015. I looked up the model because I was curious about the name. We were formerly EHC Life Builders, but because our focus on housing people, no matter what their issue, housing them first, we decided to change our name to that model. Our whole goal was to increase accessibility to housing and decrease barriers to housing. So we really wanted to make a difference for a lot of people as quickly as we possibly could. And Sandy makes a brilliant point. There isn't enough affordable housing in this valley right now, and I think we can all agree on that. I'm not saying anything that's new. The Housing First model works because we're giving people the human right to have a safe place to live and get well. What we do is once we house someone, let's take one of our veterans. We have a gentleman, I'm going to call him Ray. And we just placed him in his own studio apartment with his service dog, Cece. And he is doing very, very well. Occasionally he has some challenges. He calls his case manager. She comes out. They talk through it. They create a plan. And Ray goes back to his life. He's been able to build a very successful life in community with supportive services. He's got his case manager. He's got a therapist who helps him with his mental health, and he's got some medication that he couldn't get when he was homeless because he didn't have an address. So now Ray is on the path to success. In that veterans program that we have an 85% success rate. So if we are able to use the Housing First model, we're able to find a place that someone can live, they stay there. It's really quite amazing. And think of all the money that we're saving. We're saving thousands and thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands every year on Ray, because now Ray is not using emergency services, he's not in jail, he's not in psychiatric care, he's safe in his apartment with his dog. So that's my introduction to Housing First.
Thank you so much, Andrea. I'll follow that up just with a little bit of details about statistics. I won't bore you with statistics, but you heard the costs in the documentary. One number was $30,000, a number was $20,000 in order to manage homelessness. That's the service use in the community. And of course, that differs based on community. And in our community, there was a study that Destination Home conducted about 3 years ago, over a 6-year period, measuring costs to the county specifically. And the most vulnerable had individual costs of more than $60,000. And the savings does come up to $30,000, $40,000 per individuals if housed, as Andrea is talking about, in order to provide those services more closely and more directly to the need of those in housing. I'll shift it over a little bit now, and I wanted to ask a question about the differences that also the film introduced to us between being housing ready and having that being a requirement, and the Housing First model, which has a different set of requirements, or less requirements, as you would say. So, in the past, we've all heard, and I think some people in the community still believe this, I certainly hear it, even from members of my own family, that people need to be ready. They need to be completely sober, they need to be completely free of drugs, and they need to have everything taken care of before they receive housing assistance. I wanted to ask Robert, what might be wrong with that model? Why might not that be successful?
Well, it would be successful for a few people, but not for the majority of people. Because one thing is that people need to be ready to go into housing. They have to have a plan, they have to have something working for them in order for them to be successful. You can move anybody to any apartment, but you're not going to be guaranteeing any kind of success with that. And if you require people to be sober and to be, ready to move in before they move in, most of the time they won't get ready because they're not in a position to be able to see their way through the process. If they have a substance abuse, it's going to take them a while to get through that before they're actually prepared for moving in. But if you can house them and then work on those issues while they're housed, then they have more stability in their lives and more easy to bring to a point of readiness to success.
Thank you so very much. I'll follow up with this question for Sandy, and this is an audience question, and it gets at sort of what your introductory statement was about as well. And that is, with the inflated cost of housing in this area, so the cost to build housing as well as to live in it, does Housing First work with existing housing, or will we need to build new housing in order to make it implement the program?
Well, we will need to build new housing. There's no question about that. But the big problem that we have is that our entire political system, federal level, state level, local level, it's all controlled by special interests. This is the richest place in the entire world, right here. We're sitting in the middle of the richest place, and we still take people and kick them out on the curb, and then when they're not looking, then we send the police to throw away their stuff and to chase them from one place to another. I was at this, where they had under 280 and 101 there, they had a camp under there. Caltrans came in and had a huge, massive sweep, and they moved people 20 feet away onto the sidewalk. There is no place to go. This city does not have enough shelter beds. They don't have housing. They have no place for them to go, and they just, move them from place to place. They are literally trying to get rid of them, just like that park ranger said, to make them miserable enough so that they leave this town. In Santa Clara County, what they're trying to do is trying to be remade in the image of Google and the tech industry. If you don't work for tech, they don't want you here. They don't care if your family built this city. They don't care if you were born and raised here. They don't care if you went to school here. They don't care if this is your community. They want you out of here. And so we have got to turn that around. We've got to take our government back from these corporations like Google, from these large developers who are trying to make a fortune and with no regard for the well-being of our community.
If I could follow up, I certainly hear you on the problem, and I would like to sort of press you to maybe, we have people in the room that care about this issue and want to work on it. And so if we have a broken political system, what is it that I can do? What is it that these 40 individuals can do in their communities to help to fix that so we address the problem?
Well, we need to get involved and find some decent candidates to run for city council. We've got an example right here in this district. H.O.M.E.L.E.S.S is one of the best council members that San Jose has ever had. This representative is Helen Chapman sitting in the back there. So we need people like that who are willing to stand up for their community and not who are going to take the money from Google and just bow down to whatever these developers want. We need new solutions. We need people that are going to build housing, that are going to, basically the problem is that in America, housing is treated as a commodity. And as long as you have housing as a commodity, it's never going to be a human right. And so you're always going to end up with people living out on the streets. And if that's the kind of society we want to live in, then that's the way it's going to be. But I don't think most people in America don't want to live in that society. Most people in San Jose don't want to live in that kind of a society. So we need to change it. We need to start having the government itself build the housing, own the housing at all income levels, and just expand the social sector of housing. And take it out of the hands of these developers. They came down to city council a couple of weeks ago and said, well, if we can't make 20% profit on our investment, we're not going to build here. And we won't build in San Jose unless the rents go up 25% above what they are right now. People can't live like that. A community can't exist like that. That's what we need to change.
Thank you very much, Sandy. As a personal example, I'm moving in 3 weeks because my rent was going to be increased 8%, and it was just too much for me. So it's something that I know impacts people all across the income spectrum throughout our community. Thank you for your comments on it. I'd like to go back to Andrea, and we'll go back to an audience question that I'll supplement a little bit. And the question is, how do you handle situations where Housing First tenants refuse to follow the lease or the rules? And I ask you because I know that as a shelter provider, HomeFirst, you've implemented some of the principles of Housing First in reducing barriers in how you run the shelter. So have you seen improvements as a result of that shift? And how do you face some of these challenges?
So improvements in what? Can you be a little more specific? Sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I maybe wasn't clear. I know that you've implemented some, in running the shelter, some Housing First principles in terms of reducing barriers to entry. But that may open up possibilities or theoretical possibilities for the kinds of things that this question is getting at, where people don't want to follow the rules. And I wonder how you balance those two sides while trying to adhere to Housing First principles, but needing to maintain order and serve people in the best possible way.
Well, thank you for clarifying that. Yeah, that's a huge challenge. And it's not so much that people don't want to follow the rules, I think. I think we've got, when you look at the chronically homeless population, you've got a group of people, 70% are mentally ill, challenged with a mental health, addiction, substance abuse, and sometimes all three have physical disability as well. So now you've got somebody who's challenged and surviving day to day on the streets. They're in crisis mode all the time, so they don't always